Everything you thought you knew about the tournament has been thrown out the window, setting the stage for thrilling bouts today as the teams in Group A look to secure a spot in the quarterfinals. First on stage will be the Flash Wolves as they load up against the Afrika Freaks, who aim to do what Gen G couldn't, find a spot in the quarterfinals. Hello everyone, I'm James Dash Patterson, counting down towards our first game alongside Mark Zimmerman, Martin DeFisciolunga, and Joshua Jat Leesman. Here we are moving into day 6. What's this, an adversarial,
He's just better than me, so I get intimidated.
There
You got C9 out.
So-
I didn't get Vitality out.
And Mark also called him a squid on social media.
Yeah, what is that? What's kind
It's
is that
just-
a bad thing or a good thing?
Watch Rocket Power
Okay.
from way back.
There you
I don't
go.
get the reference
That
either,
is a throwback of a reference. I got you there. All right, yesterday we saw one of the most exciting days in World's history as Royal Never Give Up and Cloud9 became the first team to qualify for the quarterfinals. The road for them to get there was very dramatic, though.
Oh my God, what can I say about yesterday? Cloud9 going 3-0 in the normal set of the group stage games after going 1-2 the week before, and then having an incredibly close tiebreaker match for first against RNG. I think if they would have completed that run, I could definitively say it would have been the best NA moment in World's history. Even with the loss, I think it's close.
Name one that comes close.
I mean, the fact that like C9 making it to Game 5 last year and nearly making it to semifinals is probably close to that as well, but it was just such an amazing day.
And it's especially when you put in context of just a week ago, they were in a hard-fought best-of-5 versus Gambit and looking like they were going to struggle completely at Worlds. To be able to have that kind of turnaround just a week later was crazy to watch as a fan.
Yeah, and also if you look at the first couple of games they played, they got destroyed by RNG, they got destroyed by Gen G the first time they played them. So I actually didn't believe at all in C9. I had them ranked number 4 going into the day, which is again why I find it so amazing. They find their own style, we get Hecarim, Zillion, these kind of picks, and then they actually end up going all the way.
Well, you had them number 4. Let's talk about the people who got it right. 8.2% of pick'ems had Group B entirely correct. That's actually astonishing to me that many people would have predicted it correctly.
Yeah, that's a higher percentage than I would have guessed, but I mean, here in NA, you know, big old brains, always knowing that we were that we had it on lock.
Yeah, it surely had nothing to do with Gen G being started in 4th when you went to your pick'ems, and maybe people just didn't know that they were the defending world champions because they changed their name.
Right, yeah,
Nothing to do
So
with
by
it.
not knowing more, you actually get it right.
Ignorance is bliss. Yeah,
Look at that.
That's how pick'ems work.
I like
There you
it.
go.
Well, I don't like pushing that narrative on this show.
8.2% is actually not bad. Out of all the possibilities.
Yeah, all right. Well, sometimes when you theorize how a team can make a near impossible run from last place in their league to quarters at Worlds, you would assume it's the star mid laner or the veteran bot laner. But then there's the rookie support who's saving his teammates time and time again just to say, I'm helping, presented by State Farm. In Cloud9's historic day, Zeyzal stops RNG's opportunities to take out Sneaky right in its tracks.
Back to bot lane, Sneaky.
Oh, Sneaky burned down to under 100 health, a nice culling. And here comes MLXG, he's found the ult, the lasso, the pullback. Sneaky stays alive.
Yeah.
There's no flash. I'm coming mid here.
Okay.
Mid to bot. It's bot.
F6.
It's bot, it's bot.
I'm fine.
We're trying to move bot.
Can we
We're
fight?
running down, we're running down.
Yeah. I'm coming.
Clean up. Me and Resilient coming. I'm taking the long way. Cut them off.
Nocturne has flash, right here.
Yeah.
Hey, Trunks is ready to CP. Where he's there. I'm not sure.
He's TPing.
He TP'd.
Good luck,
He's stunned. He's dead. Don't flash, Sneaky.
Nice.
Nice.
Come on the wave. Come on the wave.
Good job.
Such a close play there in so many different regards. Sneaky getting level 6 right before that. That entire game, I feel like, was filled with those mechanically intensive fights. And so many of them, you were walking away with 2 dead on one side, 1 dead on the other. It was great to watch.
And in a lot of ways, that's been the story of this tournament so far. Games coming down to micro, cosms within the game itself, little moments where somebody outperforms someone else. Big surprise from yesterday, I think, was that RNG, who many expected to go 6-0 in this group stage, they suffered 2 losses before narrowly securing that first seed.
Yeah, and I think coming into the day, we were like looking at Vitality. RNG is one of the important games to decide how this group would end up looking. When Vitality then destroyed them with the Draven pick, we were like, okay, whoa, what's going on here? RNG, they're bleeding, they lose to C9 as well. I got a little bit concerned during those 2 games, but because they actually managed to change for the last 2 they played and we got more lane focus from Uzi, I kind of went like, okay, this is best of 1 versus best of 5. there is time to adapt. Now you're in playoffs, and they should be more than fine.
And what's crazy is even though they bled a lot yesterday, a lot of teams were able to beat them up a fair amount, it still feels to me like they're probably the second favorite team in the tournament behind KT.
Do you have them behind KT now?
Yeah, I have them behind KT now, but I'm not convinced that IG or someone else from Group A would jump above them in the standings based off what we've seen so far.
Yeah, based on seeding, the 2 losses meant nothing for them yesterday because they still got out as the #1 seed. And I feel like when someone matches up with them in the quarterfinals draw, no one's going to be happy about playing RNG still because of them being the MSI champions. But what I like about it is it reminds you of the mortality of this team. They're no longer untouchable. They don't have that aura of invincibility because they did drop those 2 games. And I think it changes it from a certainty to maybe a probability that they'll be in the finals.
Right. I'm just looking at RNG KT still, and I'm looking at that potential matchup against each other. Seeing Vitality and C9 find ways to punish in the early game against RNG makes me scared for them against KT specifically because they're even better at playing that part of the game. So there's some things they need to work on.
They can bleed, but beating RNG 3 times out of 5 is going to be a tall task. And while RNG C9 moved through to the quarterfinals, that does mean that we have to say goodbye to both Vitality and Gen G. Let's start with the European squad, who absolutely showed up and impressed on so many levels throughout this tournament.
Yeah, if you were not a fan of Vitality before the tournament, I think you are now because they ended up playing so many insane games with unique picks in there, crazy playstyles. It's very much high risk, high reward, everything they do in the game. And that's just a style in best of 1 that is really, really good. And the fact they actually stuck to it, I'm proud of them.
And think about what they actually accomplished in this group. They went 2-0 against the defending world champions and 1-1 against the MSI champions and tournament top 2 favorite. Insane that they did that and then still didn't make it out.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many other crazy things too, just like the amount of rookies they have on that squad while they do it, the fact that no one was really giving them a chance, and then out of nowhere they make themselves probably the favorites of Europe so far, at least in terms of how exciting they were to watch.
Right, of course, becoming a fan favorite and putting on quite a show. Gen G, on the other hand, disappointing tournament for these guys. And Korea as a whole, 1-5 record here. Let's talk about that.
I mean, it's hard to appreciate just how historically bad they were by Korean standards. Like, this is the worst record they've ever had. It's the most losses in a world championship ever Korea suffered, and it's by a single team here. It's insane to think about that, as well as the previous worst Korean team was probably the 5-3 Samsung Ozone from 2013.
Exactly, with the new format where we have the 4 groups, this is the first time a Korean team is not making it out of groups. And they weren't even close. Like, that's kind of the crazy thing for me. It was like, oh, you know, they got cheesed in the end. That's unlucky. No, they were just far and away the worst team in this group, and they got destroyed.
Yeah, and with Worlds being on home soil, I think this puts more pressure on teams like Afrika and KT Rolster to actually show up since this team fell so far under expectations.
Afrika's got to step up today, but after that back-and-forth day yesterday, Vitality's coach Yamato Cannon had a clear message for other EU teams ahead of their next games.
Europe and teams in general, it was always this chase. There was this chase about catching up to Korea, catching up to China, always trying to learn from them. But something that I've realized is that, you know, the inspiration that everyone got from Misfits, that 5-game series where they did their own thing, they came in with their own idea and they showed up big time. That was my philosophy coming into this year all around. We brought our own flair, and G2, when they showed up in their style, they're winning. When Fnatic are doing their style, they're winning. Just stay true to yourselves. Do not try to chase anyone. Don't try to copy anyone. Just be confident. Don't limit yourselves either. Go into this tournament, play your next games, believing that you can win everything. That is the mentality you need to have to conquer the best. Because anything is possible if you just believe and play with confidence and stay true to yourselves. So do that for me, Europe, please.
We need a 5th player because I want to load up for some League of Legends right now, my friends. But we'll see what kind of surprises today will bring as the teams in Group A take to the stage in Busan, starting with Korea's Afrika Freaks versus the Flash Wolves, followed by G2 Esports taking on Fongvu Buffalo. After 6 games and any eventual tiebreakers, 2 teams will secure a spot in the quarterfinals, while the other 2 pack it up and head home. Now, though, a reminder for how the group currently stands. G2 Esports and Flash Wolves are 2-1, with Fongvu Buffalo and Afrika Freaks tied at 1-2. If yesterday taught us anything, It is that anything can happen at Worlds 2018, and still, we wanted to take some shots at predictions. So here they are across the board, all four of us. And as I expected,
I'm the only Korean homer?
Wow, you think Afrika is going to make the run today?
I believe the run happens.
Part of me thinks that was what I was gonna do, but the thing is,
you guys are so boring.
Literally.
What do you mean we're boring? We have a tiebreaker between G2 and Afrika.
So the way these are made is you're basically predicting all 6 games and then just summing up your results.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, we're clearly saying that we think it's a 3-horse race here.
Yes.
With teams being at 4-2, 4-2, and 3-3. All that needs to happen is one of those games go wrong, or the other 1-2 team, which by the way is still in the running in Fungvu Buffalo, just need to do something, or another team needs to underperform. Like, there's a reason this was the closest group before this second round robin, and I think it's going to be a crazy day.
I'm just disappointed. You think that the 2-2-1 teams today are going to continue to be the 2 people getting out of the group?
They're going to go 2-1 again.
Yesterday taught me that that's not going to happen.
So I
think it's interesting that we end up with the same order, but in different ways.
Different
right?
win records.
Exactly. Different win records and/or beating different opponents to end up in the same record. Because I have a different tie than you guys.
I have Afrika winning against Flash Wolves, but then losing against G2 in the final game.
Ooh, I got the other way around because I have Flash Wolves on red side, so Keen won't get a counter pick. So I got Flash Wolves winning. And then against G2, I have Afrika on red side, so that means Wonder won't get the counter pick and Keen will get the advantage, so Afrika is going to win.
Here's the good news. Here's the good news. As compared to yesterday, we have a much higher chance that one of us is right. At least one of us on the desk.
Unless
Fungvu Buffalo shows up.
There are 64 possibilities. We have covered 4 of them.
Right, but yesterday,
don't think we're
yesterday we
nail
covered
it.
no, but it's better chances than yesterday. I think we all had we had two different possibilities yesterday, and we have 4 different possibilities today.
That's fair.
We'll dive into some more of those possibilities after the break, and perhaps the most explosive lane coming into the day. We'll also break down the playstyles of the Group A teams, all that and more after the break.
At least in our group, Group A is a bit, you don't know yet, like who will go out of groups, like you can be anybody.
다 힘들 거라고 생각을 해요. 잘 준비를 해도 힘든 팀들인데 그냥 저희가 잘해야 될 것 같아요.
Afrika Freaks now sit in a spot where they're 7,000 gold up. Their top laner's now looking for blood 1v1, and he's found it. This is the game people wanted to see. G2 just needs to stop the back. Hanabi's made it back into the base, but Wonder flashes to the side. He'll be controlled, but never killed. And G2 find their win.
This was a group that was starting to feel a little bit determined, at least in terms of who would be the 1 seed coming out, as Flash Wolves look so dominant. G2 is now tied with them at 2-1.
其实我觉得对于闪电狼我们每个成员来讲的话，我们的目标都不是放在小组赛晋级，我们是看得更远，所以我觉得小组赛晋级是必要的。
Welcome back to World's Countdown, where we're narrowing in on Game 1, just about 13 minutes away. And unlike in previous World Championships, groups this time is condensed into 1 string of days rather than separated into 2 weeks. And I want to reapproach the discussion of what this means for players, teams, and the windows of preparation that they actually have access to.
Yeah, and I think yesterday did a really good job showcasing what some of that can do. For Gen G, they didn't have the typical prep time that you expect, and that's where Korea makes their biggest adjustments, as well as the fact that it allowed Vitality and C9, who are off on hot starts, to kind of ride their momentum mentally throughout the day.
Yeah, and also really benefits teams that actually have a lot of pocket picks because you can't really prepare properly for them. You might have an idea that they could play, but you haven't had multiple days to figure out what to do. So if you suddenly see a Hecarim or whatever against your Aatrox, you might not really know what's going to happen in the game, and that can be really difficult.
Yeah, and I think the icing on the cake this year is the fact that there isn't as agreed upon of a best way to play the game. So even before Worlds, people weren't kind of merging towards this mega meta. So I think it's really hard to find scrims that will replicate the teams you're playing against in groups. If you have G2, who's a really strong 1-3-1 team, or even Afrika, who likes to play through top lane, it's hard to find exactly that matchup in scrims, whereas in previous years, it's like, just scrim a good team, and it's mostly the same. It's way different this year.
We also know from just talking to coaches in general, when you run a long tournament, a lot of what you need to do is you play a couple of games, then you go back and you analyze all your mistakes and you try and find the great solutions where you can completely remove a problem, but that takes a lot of time. If you don't have time, you find the small one, the band-aids, where you're like, okay, clearly we can't play through bot lane, so we're just going to try and draft like Tom Kent, and then we go to the other side instead and hope that is enough.
Right.
And whoever finds the best, quick, small solutions, like C9 did yesterday, they will end up looking really, really good in this, very condensed group.
Well, throughout the group stage, we have praised teams for sticking to their style and finding innovative ways, to approach the meta. And with this in mind, we're going to break down some of the play styles in Group A, starting with G2.
And like we said, really playing this 1-3-1 play style, and a lot of it's defined by what your solo laners are picking. And for the most part, they are 1v1 focused champions that are going to be fine in long lanes. So when you get out of laning phase, you put your dual lane in the mid, you avoid 5v5s, and you let these people split push in the side lanes and pick their fights. You want to keep attacking those side lanes if you can get your jungler over there, things like that. And very critically, you cannot fall behind early, because if these 1v1 champions are behind, suddenly they can't win their 1v1s and this whole strategy falls apart. So you avoid these 5v5 team fights and you keep pushing onto the side lanes. And the G2 is phenomenal at this. And I think the thing that stands out the most is how they use their side laners together. The fact that the Akali recalled down the bot side and met up with the Camille to attack put so much more pressure than what some teams do when they're bad at 1-3-1ing and they just AFK stay in side lanes. So super impressive to see them go and make team plays while still kind of maintaining the 1-3-1 style. And then it forces the opponent to actually go and try and make a 5v5 fight happen. But if you're not very good with your window, you see here Sion coming in the mid lane and kind of just hovering around, never really grouping up and pressuring with the turret. Eventually, G2 is going to respond to that, not realize that they need to commit 5 people to defending this turret, and Camille will break that back down to the bot lane. You'll see Perks on the Akali start breaking back up to the top side. They start actually getting this split push down, and then as soon as Flash Wolves want to go collapse onto the Camille, they react very well with Vision. Wonder starts backing off here, and then the Akali is actually going to be the one to switch over to the pressure and start getting damage down the top turret. So G2 do a really good job of pulling you apart and making the decisions to engage feel hopeless.
As was seen, that strategy was successful against the Flash Wolves, but I want to talk about Flash Wolves' style, being bot lane focused.
Yeah, so they are one of the best teams in the world at playing around the bot lane in the early game. This is not about split pushing or the late game, it's just purely how do they actually get ahead in their games. And for the bot focus strategy to work, you're looking at self-sustaining top laner, so you don't need to pay any attention to the guy sitting up there. Early game junglers, so you have some impact on the map in the early game. Push and roaming from mid, that's why they like to play the Sion, push, and then you can instantly go bot lane. And the last one, but also most important for me, engage support. Because you need a support who can actually set up plays when you are moving to the bot lane, so you're not wasting a ton of time. And we've seen from Flash Wolves, like their draft against PvP, is actually the perfect example with all 4 things we just highlighted. Self-sustaining top lane and Aatrox, early game jungler in the Taliyah, you have your push and roam mid lane and Sion, and then you have engage from the Alistar, which is the best pick for Sword Art. And these guys just fully understand how to set up the early game with your jungle pathing into then coordinating really cool ganks that then gives you the advantage. Eventually you're going to take the turret. Once we get some great little setup here, nice synergy between the 2 champions.
Yep.
Once you take the turret, the greatest strength of the strategy is how you unleash 2 players, AD carry and support. And especially the support who can start moving into enemy jungle, get deep vision, he can be a threat towards mid lane, he can go top. That is why Flash Wolves are so good at playing early game when they get this kind of draft, and this is how they should play today.
All right, one more unique style in Afrika Freaks, running that 4-1.
Yeah, a lot of people sometimes confuse 4-1 with 1-3-1, but I think it's different. You do have the carry top laner, but you're also having another very strong 4-man unit. This is a big importance to keep the mid turret alive. You also want to have the threat of being stronger in both setups, and then you have a top lane carry and a 4v4 team fight. So this is much more about, if you think about the champions that you'd pull, you have the carry top laner, then you'd have something like a tank jungler, a control mage mid, a late game AD carry with wave clear, and the support can be actually flexible. This is the exact composition that Afrika Freaks ran when I think they were actually playing to their strengths against the Feng Blue Buffalo, and you see there, they have the push mid lane, they isolate a 1v1 bot lane. Swain is top, but he's not top in order to fight, he's just there to cover for what the other thing would be. And this is actually one of the more common Korean playstyles because it does force the opponent to take risks. They must commit somewhere. They're either committing for the split pusher or for the 4-man unit. And it's generally sometimes even okay for a 4-1 to team fight if they're doing it on their terms. However, the weakness is that it's generally slow. It's a little bit vulnerable in the early game, as you can imagine, with having a late game AD carry and a carry top laner. But if they do get to that late game point and they have good wave clear, it can be a suffocating play style to play against. And Afrika actually only drafted to that condition once, which was their only victory.
3 distinct play styles from 3 different teams in this group. We'll see which one of them can perform on the day. But what I've noticed there is the importance of one very specific role in the execution of these styles for all of the teams, and that would be the top laners. So that's the lane I'm looking at today.
And that's what makes this group so great, is that all of them are so good. Wunder up in the top lane has been phenomenal, basically the best top laner in the West all the way through going back to play-ins. He's been disgusting, and he does it without very much jungle attention. You see him taking things like the Klepto Camille, which is very non-standard at all, but it allows him to get ahead on his own without asking resources from his team. And that's why, for me, Wunder's the, I would say, best performing top laner in this group.
Also probably the most important player in a 1-3-1 split push comp, because he is the guy who's winning the side lane for you.
Yeah, and I need to look at Afrika's Keen personally. Deficio and I did put him at number 4 on the top 20 players at Worlds before the tournament.
Looking real good right now, boys.
Standing by.
Has not done that whatsoever in the first 3 days, but I do think some of that can be attributed to the matchups and the drafts that he has been put into. The team actually said they didn't think that Urgot would be able to stop a colleague from split pushing later, so they wanted to do a 4-1. It's unfortunate they learned that that wasn't possible during Worlds, and then another time they picked him into a tank matchup as Sion against Wunder on Camille, where I feel like they weren't even trying to play to their own strengths, but thought they would just be better than the opponent. So if they do truly commit to playing through Keen, I think there's a chance he can show that up, but he's definitely had a rough first week.
So G2 play through Wunder. We want Afrika to play through Keen.
Yeah.
The last guy there was Hanabi, and it's the opposite. We obviously do not want to see Flash Wolves play towards top side. Actually, for the bot focus strategy to work, you need that self-sustaining top laner who can just sit there, try to go even, or at least not fall too far behind. Hanabi's job in this group is to take a punch in his face, but do not fall down. Do not die. Do not feed. Just wait for your team to get ahead on the other side.
He has the most thankless job you're going to see all day, where it's basically like, get hit as hard as the other person can hit you, and don't get knocked out. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, and I think the one guy we didn't mention, obviously, is the 4th top laner in this group, who could just throw a wrench into everyone's plans as well, because he's a guy who, in Vietnam, was able to carry a lot of games, whether he's playing Jay's top lane or playing a standard tank matchup. Like, he didn't necessarily perform in the first week, but does have the potential to do so based on some of the rumors we're hearing about pre-tournament scripts.
Zeros, one of the strongest members of that team for Fangwu Buffalo. But we talk about Hanabi and the tough task he has ahead of him against Wunder and Keen in the top lane. His first test against Afrika Freaks in our first game of the day. And with that just a few minutes away, I want to talk about what this win will either do for both of these teams and how it comes.
Yeah, I think, honestly, for Afrika, this probably means everything. One is their current mindset. 1 and 2 after last week, already saw Gen.G drop out. Like, there's a lot of pressure. We already heard some issues within the team. If you lose your first game to Flash Wolves as well, you got a really long day ahead of you.
Yeah, and I need to see them recommit to 4-1. You can power pick one of your top laners, I feel like, even if they're able to put Sion up in that top lane. Probably not Urgot. I think that's the one thing you probably have to ban. But isolate for 4v4 and 1v1 and let Keen go to work. I need to see them do that.
And with that, it's important to note that Spirit is coming back into the lineup, at least for the first game of the day.
Yeah, and I think we talked about kind of the mentality throughout the day. I think this first game is so huge for Afrika because you're going up against Flash Wolves, who a lot of people are pinning as one of the favorites to get out of this group. If you can win here, your next matchup's against Fangwu, and so you can kind of start building this momentum that we're talking about being super important, especially for Spirit, who did get replaced by Mowgli, who had a great game, and now Spirit's back in there, and they're clearly putting their confidence in him.
All right, well, Afrika will catch up to the Flash Wolves with a win as the LMS first seed look to finally make it out of groups after falling short in 2016 and 2017.
Yeah, and when they did make it out of groups, though, in 2015, a big part of that was a 2-0 against the Korean team in the group, who was the KOO Tigers. So there is a precedent for them being able to show up against Korean teams. However, that 2-1 could mean nothing if they lose the first game, right? Then G2 beats Fangwu Buffalo, and suddenly they're in second and even tied for third at that point. So the pressure is not off by any means, just because they had that successful first half.
Yeah, and I think you have to look at both Sword Art and Mugen to step up and be a little bit more proactive than we saw in the one loss that they did face to G2. The Braum pick clearly did not work out. We're talking about Sword Art being their primary initiator, like you're saying. Alistar is often banned away just in the current meta, and so they're going to need to find their number 2 and number 3 engaged support champions and not default into Braum or anything like that.
Yeah, I think there's a good chance we see Flash Wolves, especially after the games yesterday, go for a little bit more of a lane bully setup, but not necessarily the Kai'Sa, where it's all about just going towards the late game. Actually trying to say, you know what? Sorta can play things like Thresh as well. He can play things where you can hard win lane, combine that in with early game jungler. Afrika's weak link, in my opinion, it is the bot lane. It is where you can actually punish them really hard. And I think that's why Flash Wolves can shut them down in this first game and therefore get the great start.
Yeah, I'm hoping that both teams draft heavily to those conditions as well, instead of trying to just match each other in those specific roles.
You're gonna get Hanabi's Yasuo.
I want to see a top-focused game versus a bot-focused game.
He's good at that one.
I just hope that the explosiveness of yesterday carries over to today, and we get some sweet, sweet games. The stage is set for another day filled with action, and as we leave it to Captain Flowers, Vidius, and Spawn for Game 1.